everyone again to another episode of the Regenerage Show, the premier internet show for everything along the topics of human health, aging, regeneration, repair, and rejuvenation. I'm Ira Pastor, your host for the next half hour or so. Today's episode is entitled Form Control, Biological Aging, and Why Your Body is Not a Classic Automobile. So, on the last show, we discussed how many of the so-called aging hallmarks or damaged targets of interest in the longevity biopharma space, such as inflammation, somatic mutations, epigenetic modification, stem cell exhaustion, senescent cell accumulation, telomere variability, and so forth, while representing very interesting areas for potential pharmacotherapeutic interventions that may improve outcomes in various disease states associated with aging, they are not only found in elderly, decrepit, disease-ridden individuals, but also paradoxically happen to all be found, some to a much greater degree proportionately, in the earliest stages of life, in developing embryos and fetuses, playing roles that increase our fitness, our fertility, our robustness, and our resilience, the four key factors that measure the directionality of biologic aging. We also explained how this was indicative of higher level sets of biologic control processes, which all of these hallmarks of aging or forms of damage are in essence subordinate to, and which, when they go awry, lead to our descent into aging, disease, and degeneration. We also introduced how these integrated control processes are the same ones that are responsible for constructing, regulating, and maintaining your body's biologic form. And they're not found in a particular gene, or protein, or stem cell, or microRNA, but in much more complex nested hierarchies of combinatorial interactions, both biochemical and biophysical in nature, that occur at all levels of your system. Levels of DNA, cells, tissues, organs, limbs, body segments, and they work together to keep you whole and functional throughout a lifetime. Today, we are going to delve a bit further into this topic to fully understand and appreciate the forces at play controlling biologic form, consequently biologic aging, and ultimately using this knowledge for the potential reversal of aging in the very near future. So, starting off with a basic definition again, as we like to do, form is generally defined as the shape and structure of something, as distinguished from the materials it's constructed from. And every level of your body requires complex form control mechanisms to be in place throughout a lifetime, at the levels of DNA, cells, tissues, organs, limbs, body segments, all of it. And each of these levels, or what we'll refer to as operational hierarchies of control, sit bidirectional interactions and feedback dynamics within and between every respective level. Let's talk for a few minutes of some examples to really appreciate what's going on and this unique complexity. The form control mechanisms connected to your proteome as an example, and the proteome is just what we call the entire set of proteins that is expressed by your genome, is not just a function of the genes that encode them, the amino acids that they're built from, or their respective folding biophysics, but also a range of dynamics found within the metabolic architecture of the cell, including, but not limited to, reaction diffusion dynamics in the intracellular space, water-gel transitions, molecular crowding, the variability of cellular machinery and partitioning, cytoskeletal dynamics, and other unique forms of so-called crystallochemical structuring. Let's go for another example. The form control mechanisms connected to your tissues are not just a function of the 200 or so cell lineages that your body differentiates into during development, but also a range of biodynamics found within the intracellular spaces, such as membrane potentials, forces of mechanotransduction, friction, and shear stresses. One more example. The form control mechanisms connected to your organs are not just a function of the various tissue types formed above, but also a range of intertissue morphodynamics regulated by factors such as the viscoelasticity of interstitial fluids, the tensegrity of fascia and extracellular matrices, vascularization and neuralization processes, and very importantly, the so-called homeotaxic properties of cell communities that demonstrate so-called peripheral automaticity and independence. While there are many other examples we could go into, what all of this boils down to is that unlike the traditional reductionist focus towards approaching biologic interventions developed by the pharmaceutical industry over the 20th century and into the 21st century by purely focusing and targeting individual components of a system, which have given us very good treatments for disease, but very few cures. When it comes to the complex dynamics of biologic form, where the properties and characteristics of the component parts and the reciprocal interplay of all of the components on each other are required, we're going to have to come up with more innovative, sophisticated, combinatorial approaches to dealing with the big picture items, such as complex regeneration, disease reversion, and yes, the reversal of aging. So in this biopharma world with its ridiculously high attrition rates for new drugs, when that chemical or protein or gene therapy or stem cell or tissue engineering product or whatever it happens to be fails in the clinic or shows lackluster results, it's not because the drug products are the wrong ones, but that the approach, when ignoring all of these other dominant form control mechanisms, is incomplete. The good news is that there are many clues to be found in the natural world to guide us on this next generation combinatorial quest for complex regeneration, disease reversion, and rejuvenation as it pertains to aging. Where do we look? Well, all around us, as evolution has taught many species these tricks already. We all live on a planet with many organisms which, from a health and wellness perspective, are much further advanced than human beings. Many lower organisms, such as the amphibians, can replace lost or damaged organs and tissues that are identical in both structure and function to the originals effortlessly throughout a lifetime, regenerating a wide variety of tissues, including spinal cords, limbs, hearts, whole eyeballs, and even major segments of their brains. In a similar fashion, species like the planaria possess fascinating skills for repairing and reversing cellular and genetic damage when it occurs. Cancer, as an example, is found to be extremely rare in species that display an efficient regenerative mechanism, even under the action of potent carcinogens. In many cases, when cancer does occur, tumors have been found to spontaneously remodel and integrate into their surroundings as normal, healthy tissues. Some organisms, like hydrozoans, age in reverse and then return to a youthful state later on in life. Few can even die and be reborn. Extensive study into the regeneration and repair mechanisms of these non-human species have found them intricately connected to an underlying capability of complex tissue reprogramming and remodeling that allows these organisms to recapitulate, in each example, original biologic form. These, what are known as epimorphic form remodeling capabilities, represent basically a biologic reset whereby various forms of genetic and epigenetic damage are erased in cell populations, followed by their redirection into a generative developmental program where they become reintegrated with their microenvironment, cellular neighbors, and then reorganized via what's known as a community effect along tissue, organ, and positional specificity. Let's repeat that. Organisms that have the ability to turn back biological time to either regenerate or reverse disease or rejuvenate all or most of their bodies possess two inherent capabilities that they use in synergy. One, the ability to reestablish the embryogenic potential of their cells, genomes, and gene regulatory networks. And two, the ability to reestablish the morphodynamic architecture of their tissues, organs, limbs, and body segments. The ability to tap into and mimic these capabilities with novel bioproducts in human beings are going to offer potential solutions to a wide range of disorders responsible for human degeneration, suffering, and death, and will help more rapidly usher in an era of radically extended health span and lifespan extension. Which leads me to something I brought up on the last show, and that is the jettisoning of viewing the human body as a classic car that can be fixed as such. If we want to the space to move forward at all, we must throw away this antiquated analogy, right out the paradoxical proverbial window. While some folks may choose to see the human organism with its 50 trillion component parts, also known as cells, as just a more complex machine than the 25,000 component parts of a car, at the end of the day, that car has no inherent top-down self-repair capabilities like the human body. The internal combustion engine cannot repair the spark plugs. That car cannot demonstrate decoupling and compartmentalization of function like the human body can. You can't chop the engine in half and go half the distance. The car doesn't have so-called peripheral automaticity. If the engine dies, the car dies. If the battery dies, the car dies. And lastly, that car has few, if any, integrated systems with feedback loop control hierarchies. And unlike the crucial connected relationships between, say, the endocrine system and the peripheral nervous system, or the central nervous system and the lymphatic system, the fuel injectors don't affect what happens to the brakes. The GPS system doesn't affect the windshield wipers. Now, of course, I'm having a little bit of fun with this one. But on the serious note, it is imperative for anyone, everyone, interested in a future vision of radically extended health and lifespans to understand the core differences between mechanism and organism, so we do not waste time with failed approaches of decades past. On the next show, we are going to continue further on these themes and delve further into the topic of combinatorial biologics as pharmacotherapeutic interventions for regeneration, disease reversion, and aging. Now, moving on to the non-mandatory homework part of the show, the paper that we're going to be suggesting on today's show is entitled Looking Proximally and Distally, 100 Years of Limb Regeneration and Beyond by David Skocum's group at Indiana University. It's a fascinating paper. It'll take you a few reads to get through it, but it goes into all that we as a scientific community have been learning for the last century in the area of regenerative biology. A lot which unfortunately has been forgotten, but much learning that is really going to be crucial for further incorporating this theme of form control and regulation, and thus the trickle down to radical longevity goals at hand. So once again, thank you very much for joining me again today. I'm Ira Pastor, your host for the Regenerage Show. If you like what you hear and see on the show, please subscribe to the channel. Follow us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn, all social networks. Once again, thank you very much for joining us again, and really best wishes in health and a long life. Thanks so much.